So much power when you have a microphone. People just do your bidding. You shall do my taxes for me.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. We're gonna figure this out here eventually. So, everybody, dance.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, thank you everyone for coming to the February DevOps Meetup. My name is Tom Duffield. I'm one of the organizers here, along with Bridget and Andy and many other nameless peons who do our bidding.
Get the volume down on the panel.
They're everywhere. Where am I supposed? Okay, I think this is safe. Okay, this seems safe.
We're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my corner. So, anyways, where was I? Oh yes, peons. There's a couple announcements I would like to make. First off, if you are not aware, DevOps Days Minneapolis was announced, and registration and the CFP are currently open. The registration is well underway. We have sold out of our early bird tickets, but just for you fine folks, we have a special super secret discount code. Yeah? So the discount code is DevOps MSP, all lowercase, like the URL up there, except without the .org. That is.
Don't put tweeting that.
Yes. Super secret. Super secret. It's for you. There are limited number.
Is that on the live stream?
Whoops.
If they're watching,
I'm watching you.
they care.
I'm watching you.
We haven't actually broadcasted the live stream URL yet.
All two of you.
It's secure.
Don't tell anyone.
Change it to password 1.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So yeah, the registration is open. There's a limited number of those. So if you haven't already, that's $50 off the current registration fee. That is $50 off the registration fee currently. So if you are working for a nonprofit or a self-funded, that is $50 off the $199. And if you work for enter big company name that has public offering and is in the Fortune something 100, that is off
You
of
probably
the.
don't need a discount. You could leave it for other people.
That is off of the $249. Also, the CFP closes on March 31st. Right? Yes. If you haven't already, please do propose something. We prefer and love to have local Minneapolis speakers speak. So even if you are kind of nervous, you're like, oh man, I don't know if they want to hear me talk. I want to hear you talk. Okay? Cool. Super, like, even the 2 people still?
3.
The three of you. We're gonna do this. So, yes. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. Right. Well, no. Yeah.
This stuff,
Any of the
tell them
important-
to join Slack.
Right. So we do have a Slack channel group.
We have a Slack team.
We have a Slack team. You can join the Slack team by going to DevOpsDaysMSP.org. Yep, DevOpsMSP.org, and clicking on the Slack buttons, and we'll take you to sign up, and that's how you get access to the team. A lot of cool people hang out there. I'm one of them. So if you want to come talk to me, you can join. If you want to come talk to Bridget, you can also join. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to bring up Amy Patton, who is this. Okay, I already got this. The VP of Tech Ops with SPS. She got a promotion. Who is our sponsor? And I'm going to hand the mic over to her. You're going to have to come over into the safe corner.
She's fine. Really.
Thank you. So secrets have already been divulged, and people are doing taxes. I'll see you later. That's fantastic. And this is the shameless sponsor speech. So thank you. I'm glad to have so many people here. One good note is we did get the fans put back on, so hopefully it'll cool off a little bit in here as we go along. But so SPS Commerce has the largest retail network with over 60,000 customers. And we have a technology team that spans the globe. So we have multiple offices in the United States, as well as in Ukraine, in Australia, and we have a team in India as well. And DevOps is very important to us, and we have a large movement in SPS Commerce, and Andy has helped us with a lot of the work related to that, so thank you, Andy. But again, I'll keep this short. We're really glad to have you here, and I'll let the panel come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, we're gonna see if we can figure this out. We're gonna not have, thank you, we're gonna not have that. But we probably should have our panelists. So I'm Bridget Kromhout. I am one of the organizers for DevOps Days and the DevOps Meetup, along with Tom and other fine folks. And I guess I want to introduce our panelists in the order that they're paying attention, not on their phones. So Heather. Okay, he's tweeting, that's important. Heather Mickman. Heather is joining us from Target. Thank you. Judy Carlson is joining us from Thompson Reuters. And Andy Domeier is joining us from SPS Commerce. Yes, please go ahead and pass water out to everyone. Yes, please, that would be fantastic. You have a beverage, okay. So I'm going to pass this off and let people introduce themselves. And just because we're having mic issues here, we're going to figure this out. Basically, what everyone is here to hear about, what we promised you we would talk about, is the internal DevOps events that these fine folks have run at these companies. So I think we'll talk about that, but we also are just going to back it up a little bit, and we're going to talk about who they are, what their roles are at these companies, and what brought them to this whole DevOps thing. So let's hear that first.
Hello, hi, I'm Heather Mickman. In Target, I've been at Target for about 9 years. My current role is the director for the enterprise. This is kind of a long name. So I'm always open to good creative ideas on how to shorten it. The enterprise API integration and public cloud engineering team. And I've had a lot of passion around DevOps probably for about, I'd say about 4 years or so. We started a small team that started developing APIs for Target and really changed the way that we were doing engineering within our IT organization. And that's kind of where a small grassroots movement started. So I can talk a little bit more about that after we get through the rest of the intros.
Hi, I'm Judy Carlson. I've been at Thompson Reuters about 9 years. It started, I think, with my team. I'm a development manager, and a lot of my team wanted to try some new things 3-4 years ago. And starting with continuous integration and building upon that and bringing ideas to me, and I could really see the benefits that these ideas and new changes were bringing to the team. So I got on board too and started looking at continuous delivery, DevOps, and the whole automation framework ideas out there.
Hi, I'm Andy Domeier. I've been with SPS Commerce for about 11 years now, which feels like forever, but when I started there was about 80-ish employees, and we're up over 1,100 now. So it's really felt like a new company just about every year that I've been here. And obviously with that kind of growth, you need to adopt culture and methodologies like DevOps in order to be able to scale and grow and figure out how you solve the next big technical problem. So a lot of DevOps has grown a bit organically at SPS in terms of just like, this is how we have to run our technology organization in order to get things done effectively. So it's been a pretty interesting ride for me, but it fits really great into our culture here.
Great. Wonderful. Let's see. Is this, what's that? It's green. Audiovisual is always the hardest part. All right.
No, the side. There's a little switch on the side. Push it all the way up. All the way to the top.
Can we use Chef to automate that?
It said Mike.
You have light?
No,
No light?
I'm going to trade that, maybe send that over that way so we can get that fixed. As you may guess, I am not an audiovisual expert, but we have several in the room, which is fantastic. Okay, so what I really want to hear is, I've heard a little bit now about what brought you and your organizations towards some DevOps type stuff, but you also ran some internal DevOps events. And I'm guessing that I think Target did it first. So I'm gonna start with Heather. We're not gonna always just go in a circle, but I'm gonna start with Heather. And if one of you wants to, debate or add something to what she says, just be like, Mike, give it to me. But I want to hear what led Target to and you to start having internal events. What does that even mean?
Right, so I mentioned, about 4 years or so ago, we had small team, a small team that I was a part of, and there were kind of pockets of small teams across our IT organization that were starting to embrace kind of more modern ways of doing software development, breaking down the barriers in between development, operations, and really changing the way that we did work. And so we were getting excited about it, right? Like small groups were getting excited, and DevOps, right? And so that created a little bit of, I don't know, some kind of rolling of eyes, or what are these folks really talking about? And not,
did they think you were code hippies?
Code hippies, yeah. Unicorns from, it'll come to me in a second what one of the quotes was that was funny. But yeah, and so there wasn't a lot of acceptance, or really just a lot of understanding of what it was that these small kind of teams were talking about. And then it was about 2 years or so ago, and I was sitting right next to Ross Clanton at the time, and I leaned over. I had just read a write-up in DevOps Weekly about an internal DevOps days that ING had done. I was like, Ross, what do you think? Let's host an internal DevOps days and just start talking about this a little more broadly. So that was 2 years or so ago, 2 Februaries ago, that we hosted our first internal DevOps days. And it was great. We didn't know who was going to show up to that first one, if it would just be me and Ross and a couple of the folks that were helping us plan it. But we ended up having about 100 or so folks turn out, and since then it's really grown, and we've had probably 8 events since then, so once a quarter. So it's been really fantastic, and the kind of tops down support that we have now, and what we're doing now within Target is just scaling it out across our entire IT organization.
Awesome. Okay. And I think I'm thinking Thompson Reuters, you did it last summer, and SPS was in November. So let's go in chronological order.
Okay. So we were a little bit different. We're global, so the first event was in London, and then they had one in St. Louis, Missouri, and we started hearing about all these events that were taking place. And Egan, they reached out to Egan and said, you guys need to host one too. And it was more for continuity. Are we all hearing the same message? Because again, we had pockets everywhere globally of people trying to start things up, and what does this mean? And trying to get the same message out. So all these different groups that were really interested in doing something were sharing their learning, sharing their knowledge, and trying to tee up things in a similar fashion. And it's really grown now because we've started some greenfield type projects, and the people on these projects really want to use DevOps and work together with operations and the engineering teams and automate as much as they can and make things more efficient, make results better. So it's really grown, and like you mentioned, ours was last summer, and it's coming up on 6 months here, so we're thinking, man, it might be a time for another one, and see if the messages have changed, the information people are sharing, and what kind of response we get a few months later.
So I cheated a little bit, and I was able to infiltrate Target's DevOps space as well.
I actually should have mentioned that as a highlight of when Andy was a speaker.
I was this is recorded, right, Tab? I was a highlight. So it was last fall. Our CTO said, "Hey, Target's doing these. Seems like they're pretty awesome." And I was like, "Yeah, I think they're pretty awesome." He said, "You should do one in a month." So we scrambled a bit. It worked out great. The timing was great because I was able to be part of Targets this fall. And we put together an event at SPS, and we really invested a lot in our service providers. So one of the things that I feel like we have a big challenge here at SPS with is we're growing really fast, and we've got a lot of very specific things we need to try to solve for. And sometimes that really limits the time we have to look outside our four walls and look at how everyone else is solving problems and think about how service providers we might already be using are solving problems. So we really use that event as an opportunity to get different thought leaders in here and different service providers in here and really look at, are we looking outside our walls enough? For the service providers we have, are we using them well? Let's get some opportunities and conversations started there. So a lot of ours is really focused more around just trying to give our technology organization time to kind of breathe and think about things outside our four walls and make sure we're thinking about things and not trying to solve problems differently than others that have already solved them, but also making sure that for some of the tools and technologies we're using, are we using them consistently? And it's just been really a great experience so far, and it was totally awesome to get a sneak peek cheat at how Target ran theirs, and it's kind of crazy how similar ours was to the one that you guys ran in terms of you get a couple tech teams up there, they start talking about technologies, and all of a sudden you see them talking afterwards about how did you solve that? Because we have that same problem and we're not solving it the same way. And it's like, oh my gosh, that one conversation was enough to make today totally worth it. There was more of those, so that was really great.
I think I'm gonna point another question specifically at Judy, because Andy did mention that he got people like Cessna. Jeff Cessna's hiding in the back there somewhere, but he's one of our local luminaries. You should definitely hire him for workshops if you want somebody to really help you with stuff on DevOps, design thinking, etc. And I got to come in and speak with SPS, and then you're mentioning that you got to speak at Targets. And I'm curious because Judy can talk a little bit about the local luminary that they had come speak at theirs, but I'm curious how you make the decisions as to who to bring in from outside and who to, put up on stage from inside your organization. Like, you're kind of looking at all your engineers and you're like, who am I going to put a mic in their hand? Let's see. Like, how do you talk to us about that? Like, and also how you decided to bring people in.
So big thanks to Tom. He was our keynote, and it was a decision of how do we find out what's going on out in the industry? Who's out there that can shed some light on what everyone's doing? What is the dynamic out there? And Tom was able to provide time and great presentation. People are still referring to it on our internal hub site. So I think it was really important, since it was our first event, to kind of level set what's going on out there, what's the message, and it really tied into what the remaining speakers brought to the stage then too. It all kind of just came together. We were very, very lucky, and I think we would try to do that again, find another external speaker, bring them in, continue to get that best practices, point of view that can be shared.
I would just add on, Target as well, we always bring in, we try and bring in probably 2 external speakers to each of our different events. And of course, because I'm sitting up here in front of a big crowd of people, I'm now forgetting everybody who that was. But it's been a lot of great people. Like Bridget has been at some events, Andy, like we said, Jeff Cessna. We've had Ian Maltez, who's a local engineer.
Tom.
Works for Tom Duffield,
Ducey.
So Michael Ducey. So we've and really just
Jez Humble.
Jez Humble, how could I forget? Thanks. See, that's what I asked Ross to sit over here. I was like, I probably will have stage fright and forget a few things, so great, thanks.
Rob Cummings.
Rob Cummings from Nordstrom, who's an amazing engineer. He was actually our first external speaker. He kicked off our first DevOps Days event. So it's fantastic to hear those outside views. And then another thing that we've done, in addition to the just DevOps Days, where we have engineering teams coming up and talking about the work that they're doing, one of the big changes that we needed to do internally as well was to convince kind of our middle management layer and up about what is DevOps and why is this important to me and why should I be listening, to what I'm hearing from teams. And so we hosted a one-day kind of manager, middle manager, I can't think of a better word for that, and above event where we brought in kind of our peers from other large enterprise IT organizations that had gone through or were in the middle of similar DevOps transformations, and it was a really, really powerful day because it was, well, listen, it's not just these, West Coast software companies that are talking about this. Like, these are actually like enterprise IT shops that are doing, having these transformations happen as well, and that was an incredibly, incredibly powerful day for us as well. So, I don't know, as it add to that, the external, influence has been great.
Yep. I heard something really interesting in there. I don't know if everyone caught this, that Target brought in a speaker from Nordstrom as the first external speaker. And I think this is really powerful because this says something about the spirit of collaboration and cooperation and sharing in DevOps. So it's like, these are clearly competitors who are, out there in the market competing with each other, but then they're also cooperating. And I'm interested in hearing, I think everybody who is selling these ideas inside their organization has to fight upstream sometimes against well, if we talk about the things we're doing, whether it's, even inside your organization, but with a few people from that other group, we don't trust them, or, or competitors, or, outside forces. Even before, obviously you've been out on many large stages talking about the work you've done at Target, but for people who are just starting to try to have that kind of openness, like, what would you say to them?
Embrace it. I guess I would just say embrace it, especially from a technology perspective, right? Like, it was fantastic to hear some of the same challenges that another large retailer was facing, both from a, what are the business challenges that we're trying to solve? When do we have to scale? What do our different peak seasons look like? What are our teams doing? What are those challenges? And how from an engineering perspective, do we tackle those problems?
I think to add to that, when you have, whether it's local folks come in, like I was able to come join yours, or having somebody like Rob come in from Nordstrom, there's a confidence about your organization that goes with that you're comfortable having somebody like that come in and speak to your team and talk about how to be awesome. And I feel like there's a level of confidence that comes to the organization and comfort that says, hey, they're fine with Rob coming in and talking to us about this because they feel like they're headed in the right direction too, and there's nothing to be worried about. Right? So I think that's something that goes a bit undervalued in that type of a move.
And I think I can add a little different twist on it. Because we're starting some new projects, we're also using new technologies. Everybody's at the same level. Everybody's coming in with the same questions. So it was a really good time to start pulling different team members together and start talking about the different problems, how they are addressing new technologies. And we're looking at a brand new process. We have to find new ways to do things. So it's a really good way to introduce this.
So we have several organizers on stage here who are involved in the community DevOpsDays.org, like DevOps Days community event in Minneapolis. And so I would love to hear you attended last year. And so from either the attendee point of view or the organizer point of view, I would love to hear what's the same and what's different when you're doing stuff for the general public versus stuff for inside your company. If you want to think about it for a while, pass to somebody else. It's fine.
Well, here's what popped to mind, and maybe it's a little too brutally honest. When it's inside Target, I'm somehow a lot more nervous about it. Like I remember like driving to that one day event where I talked about where it's kind of like our management team showing up for a day, and my heart was racing going into the office. I was like, this day is either going to be totally awesome or like totally suck, because it's all my peers and it's the people that you work with every day. That's my brutally honest answer. And then I think, but maybe more helpful would be when organizing inside your company, like the culture within your company, and you can tailor the event specifically to what will and will not work. So as an example, like open spaces, that was a brand new concept internally within Target, and so we had to tailor the way that we organized those and kind of kick those off. You did a fantastic job kind of setting them up for us at one of the events. And so I think that's kind of the advantage of doing one internally, is you can make it what it needs to be for your company's culture.
I went as an attendee, and I just sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, how could I introduce this back at Thompson Reuters? And I was emailing and sharing thoughts all day long with some of my colleagues, just thinking, you know what they just said? How can we introduce this? Will this fly? And just trying to figure out how are we going to start breaking down some of the silos? How are we going to communicate this? How can we educate and encourage people to change their philosophy, their mindset, and how they work? So for me, it was really an energizing experience to try to start thinking through some of that and how we're going to share it.
And then you did.
And then we did.
We had the opportunity to do DevOps Days Minneapolis in 2014, and then in 2015. So we had done 2 community ones before we really looked at doing one internal to SPS, and I hadn't really thought about it until I heard the idea that Target was doing them. So you didn't even say ING did them. You could have just said we were the first, and I would have totally bought it. But I think that I get really excited about the energy in general, the energy levels at both of those events, the community one and the first one internal we had at SPS. I agree with Heather. There's an aspect of holding one internally that is as around the lines of like, well, is it going to be interesting to the team? Are people going to want to attend? Is everyone going to be like, wow, that was a waste of a day, I could have been productive? So there's a little bit of, there's a different kind of pressure to that than the community one. I feel like for the most part, the community folks are going to be, they know what to expect, and I think that the committee's in a spot to really deliver what we need to do there. But it's a different kind of energy when you hold it internally. And one of the things I think we really valued from at SPS by holding them internally is that you can really focus on the tech. So the community ones are awesome, especially for culture. I don't think anything can replace this idea of thinking outside the walls, talking to people outside of your organization, and really getting into the tech community in Minneapolis and really meeting people that are solving the same problems, but solving them on different tech stacks or solving them with the same tech stacks differently. You don't get to have those conversations inside the 4 walls of your company. But what you can do when you hold an event internally to your company is you can focus on your own tech stacks. So, hey, we're using these types of technologies. We're on Chef, we're on Puppet, we're on whatever. And this is how we're leveraging them. We're using AWS, things like that. So there's some opportunity there to get a lot more specific on the technology stacks, which is really helpful. And I think we did a good mix when we held our first one around getting external folks in, but having most of that specific to our specific challenges, whether it was technology or Bridget came and talked a ton about collaboration and remote employees, because we were in a state where we have a lot of global presence right now, but I would say there's a lot we can do to get better at being effective at that. And then talking about things like containers and all of that kind of stuff, we're headed there, but we're not there, but it's specific to problems we have to face. So that was definitely an advantage of holding an internal one, is really focus specifically on some of the problems you're having. Absolutely doesn't replace the community one and what you get the value of that, but I think we see a ton of value in both. So.
I'm just going to add one thing quick.
You should add one thing, and then you should ask them some questions.
Oh, jeez. Well, I'd say, so for our internal events, we saw, and any of the Target folks in the room, correct me if I'm wrong, but my perception of how we've kind of evolved the events over the last couple of years is the first couple events were very much kind of culture focused in terms of what we needed to do, like what is it that we're talking about, what does DevOps mean, what does the culture look like, and that as we started to build that just a lot more kind of grounds up momentum, that's when we were able to like make the shift. In fact, a lot of our engineering community kind of demanded that we make the shift of like, all right, great, like this has been a lot of fun talking about culture. I feel like we've talked about that a lot, but now let's start talking about the actual problems that some of our teams are solving, so that then we can make those connections within, like within this room and outside of this room as well.
So one of my favorite things about attending the Target DevOps days was there was this moment in the room. So one of the things that the event I was at that was super awesome was that almost everything after the external speakers was demos. And there's a bunch of tech, hey, we're solving these problems, we're trying to do this thing. And I think my favorite question that entire day, and it's totally stuck with me ever since that day, was somebody like literally last row of the room stood up and was like, hey, what's the name of your GitHub project? Because they're like, I'm doing the same thing, I can reuse exactly what you're doing and I can contribute. And it was like, wow, the entire day was totally worth it because of that one thing that just happened. And that was, I mean, those you know, when you're all solving very specific problems to what you're trying to deliver, that type of conversation is difficult to have across the different teams when you're all trying to focus on what's happening. So I thought that was a super awesome moment in that day.
So,
I have I mean, we're not going to take absolutely all day to answer my questions, but I have the thought that we should see if you have questions for each other before we take questions from the heckling zone. Because hey, I mean, you have the mic in your hand, or at least you will in a moment. So let's pass the mic around and give you a chance to ask questions for each other, since you're all probably going to do these events again. And you can take some input. Judy looks excited, so I'm going to give her the mic first.
Please, thank you. So I'm looking for advice. I'm thinking about having the next event. So things that people have really enjoyed that you would not want an internal event to miss. You want to make sure it's included. What would you recommend?
Because he's in the room, I'll make a plug for Jeff Susna. It was a great add to the roster. I think there's a lot that comes from having some thought leadership locally. Bridget as well, just in terms of, I'm sure you got that with Tom. It's like, wow, these people are right here in Minneapolis, and holy cow. It's a bit eye-opening for the organization that is so focused on delivering things that suddenly like, okay, not only are there people solving really awesome problems and thinking really big, but they are literally 10 minutes from me and might have coffee with me if I would ask them to, and things like that. That I feel like that was that has a really deep cultural impact that you can't replace with some sort of tech talk or anything like that. And I think that's why when we look at like DevOps Days Minneapolis, local talks are just great for that type of thing. The impact that has on the culture is really valuable. And then the other thing, and you know, other SPSers here can add to this if they think differently, but I think the ability to really focus on the tech stacks that are making a difference in your organization. Okay? So if there's patterns or solutions that have great momentum, you know, they might not be necessarily solving a problem, or like containers they're not in production yet, right? Do we have any containers in production yet at SPS?
Close.
Close, we're close.
you need a website. Do we have containers in production yet?
That should be like, that should totally be like a, is it down for just me type of website? Are there running containers, or is it just me? Yeah. But things like that have a real impact on like, we're trying to solve these problems. That's something that I don't think you can replace with anything else. If you're holding an internal one, having that really focused, targeted, this tech stack, and making examples of patterns that are positive or helpful, things like that, are things that I find really valuable.
I mean, I'm just going to second again the external speakers. Like I've already mentioned that a couple times. I think that's super, super important to do to just help us take our kind of enterprise IT blinders off for a little bit. And then I'd also say, so one really big learning that we had as we started with our first small event, and then there was some support across the organization, and then lots of people wanted to get in to like help organize the second one, but it was a little bit more of a voluntold type committee that got formed versus a like, yes, I'm actually really interested and passionate and I want to show up and help make this thing happen. So we ended up on like, I think the second one probably having 15 people, 20 people as part of the planning committee. And it ended up being like the same 3 people doing all of the heavy lifting. So I think that like there's so much passion, so like finding the passion amongst the people to help with that coordination, and like and then if you have those people, like you will then also find the topics that are most relevant to talk through.
Great, thank you.
What questions do you have for each other?
I have questions probably more specifically for Judy. Heather and Ross, I don't know what you've tackled in terms of globalization, but at SPS, so just added a Toronto office, have an office in Kyiv, have some folks in India, have some folks in Australia, and I think some of the challenge we see is that maybe those offices aren't quite as big as Minneapolis, and so there's obviously this desire to invest in making sure we have a common technology culture and aspects of that, but just some of your perspective on, for multi-site, it doesn't have to be global, but even if you're just in the US or wherever, how have you seen some of these types of events work collaboratively in terms of how do you keep the culture concepts consistent and what kind of value is that added?
So I mentioned London and St. Louis, Missouri and Egan, but we also had DevOps events in Bangalore, and I believe there's been a couple other sites in New York. Yeah, thanks, Ben. And there is a common slide deck that kind of goes around, and there are some points in there that we really want to make sure we get shared across all the offices, so everybody kind of hears the common message. But then we're, like I mentioned, each group has brought in a local speaker to kind of get that best practice perspective or industry perspective. And then we also have team sharing knowledge, so we constantly have groups sharing how they tackle the problem and what they found. Here's the code where they can share. So we have a lot of that going on with the different project teams.
And that spans
and that's, site. Yep. So we actually have on some of the projects going on right now, developers located in Egan, in India, in New York, and they're all working in the same code base and sharing. So we're actually trying to span globally through our projects to get that knowledge sharing.
So two things. What we tried once, maybe twice, to do a joint, just kind of like Bangalore will do a DevOps days, and we'll do a handoff in the morning to Minneapolis, and that it worked okay. But I think we found it was fine to have the two separate sites to do the DevOps days kind of differently or distinctly. And then just kind of do recaps back and forth in terms of what were the different sessions, what were learned. And then I'd say, just kind of more from a practices perspective, so Ross, about a little more than a year ago, started what's called the dojo space up at our northern campus. And that's part of our strategy to scale DevOps across our super big IT organization. And so that's actually bringing different teams into a space where there's experts in different technologies to help through different challenges, whether it be a couple-day challenge or a 30-day challenge, to help teach different teams different ways of working. And so that's been happening at our northern campus here for about a year or so, and just opened one in Bangalore in like the November, December timeframe as well.
Can you describe what a dojo space is a little bit more?
Sure. I'm actually going to turn it over to Ross. It's an open.
This is actually a big enough question, and we are short enough on time that I'm just going to invite Ross to speak at one of these meetups sometime soon about this concept. Does that sound valid for you? Show of hands who wants to hear more about Target's Dojo. Yeah, everyone who is still awake and listening to me is interested. So,
yeah, it's super. It's a great concept.
Yes. I know it's getting late, and we gave you beers, and there's going to be more beers.
Well, there's coffee stout. You should be awake. It's delicious. Coffee stout. Okay. So Bridget said if you're all sleeping, if you're sleeping, she wasn't talking. It was us three that put you to sleep. So I feel a little bad.
It was me droning on, asking too many questions.
Okay, so one from the audience then.
Yeah, well, I was gonna do a little audience participation really quick. Just out of curiosity, show of hands, how many people here feel like their company is doing some sort of internal DevOps events, yearly, monthly, weekly, something? That is not a lot of people. You get like 10%-ish?
Hands down if you work for one of these companies.
Yeah. Target, SPS, or Thompson, don't put your hands up. How many people have SPS or DevOps related events? 5. I counted 5. Okay. How many people wish their company did a DevOps type event?
Yeah.
Okay, 2. No, just kidding. We're going to 2. For those of you out there who wish their companies did more, one of the things that we started doing at SPS was, instead of trying to do a really big event frequently, we went to a Meetup style tech event. That's more of it's like an hour long, have a couple beers when you're done, try not to do any slides, just quick demo, talk about tech, have some fun. And that's been really productive for us in terms of just like kind of quick hitters, what are people working on, what's interesting, any early wins, any new tech that people are bringing in. And that's been pretty fun for just kind of having a little bit faster feedback and not having to do like this full day event too frequently. So something to think about or potentially take back to pitch. It's not hard to justify an hour.
And we do need to be cognizant of time, but I know a few of you, I told you to sit in the heckling zone. So we should take a question or 3 from the audience, because I know that people either have something that they would like the panel to address or that we didn't cover, or something that they want to make sure that the panel says before they say their closing statements, the closing arguments. Ross.
Can you describe the state of your culture before you started these events and what effect these events had on changing that culture and on your people?
Great question, thank you. I'm going to just pick Judy.
Thank you. Very siloed, and I think it raised awareness of what other groups in the organization were doing, and who could you start reaching out to and talk about this and learn what they were doing. So I think it brought awareness and kind of started to break down some of the silos.
For us, I feel like there's a strong desire. The silos were more specifically just in terms of folks' bandwidth and giving them an opportunity to kind of stop and look at what everybody else is doing, look at our tech stacks, things like that. And having people like Bridget and Jeff come in, get some pretty good opportunity to stop and reflect on. Are we listening to the results of operations? Are we collaborating with folks across sites? And I think we're a little bit more empathetic as an organization. I think in general we weren't very siloed. It was just a matter of our bandwidth and ability to slow down and actually have those conversations for a day.
Target's been doing it the longest, so I bet you have most results right now.
Well, yeah, so I'd say we started as a very siloed organization that would hand off from one group to another group to another group to another group. And so in each group there would be I'm responsible for doing this. There wasn't overall kind of accountability for what were the solutions that we were building. It was just hard to get work done. Like it was kind of waiting in queues to get any work to happen. And that was okay for us, I guess, at that, 5-10 years ago. And since we have started, I think DevOps days were a start for us to start breaking that down from a bottoms-up perspective. We got buy-in from our senior leadership team, and that's made a huge difference. And yeah, our transformation right now is we're trying to roll product teams, DevOps out, full stack ownership out across our entire IT organization, and we've made a ton of progress. We still have a lot of work to do, there's no doubt about it, but and I think that DevOps days are a fantastic way for us to talk about that as an organization. It has definitely helped.
And I feel like I wasn't super clear at the beginning, but I want to make sure everyone knows that we are talking about company internal DevOps events here, and not the community DevOps days, DevOpsdays.org event. So I don't want to conflate them because then that can lead to confusion. But the DevOps Days community event is definitely one that is valuable, but this sharing inside companies, I think, is really, I still don't think there's enough companies doing it. Like, I think this is, you're trailblazers here, but I would like to see a lot more companies doing this, just because I think it makes a huge difference, is what you're telling us. And I think maybe we have like one more question here. Are you a plant? I think you might be a plant.
I'm not a plant.
We're going to find out.
Tell us about
I'm not a plant, and I have to apologize for this ahead of time. I really believe in the power of stories to tell the tale of success. And I know when Thompson Reuters had its internal DevOps Days conference, we had some new partnerships that just kind of appeared out of nowhere. Really powerful ones that changed a lot of people's minds about how to do business. I have one in particular in mind that I'm gonna, but I'm wondering if any of you guys have any stories like that you'd like to tell. Something that came out of the conference.
And that sounds like a great place to leave off. So we'll tell those stories, and then we'll let everybody mingle and have more beer.
Great, so this question is between you and beer. I'm going to try to make this as long and slow. You're all just going to stand up and get beer. Anyway, real quickly, just in terms of on things I saw at SPS, and Jeremy and Andy and any other SPSers here, I'd love for you to shout out your thoughts. But I saw at SPS because we really focused a lot on some very great thinking and cultural talks like Jeff and Bridget, and then we jumped right into very specific service providers like AWS, LaunchMonitor, and a couple other folks that we have very, very important service providers in our stack. And what I saw come out of that day is people wanting to do more with the tech. So they were like, oh wow, this technology does these things, I want more, or I want this. I'm not using this service yet, I want to use this service, and then I got to tell them we don't have budget, and then we had to have those conversations. But they were great conversations to have because suddenly people were realizing that there was tech in the org that solved their problems that they just weren't aware of or weren't using yet. So that was something that really impacted SPS outside of the general learnings in terms of just cultural effectiveness and getting better in terms of remote and some of those things that we've done.
And I would add to that, I think there were awareness was created for different POCs that were in progress. Teams were working on things. People didn't know it, and now all of a sudden they were sharing how far they had gotten and what their next steps were. So I think it opened some doors for people to use some of this database automation to in their delivery pipeline that we didn't even know existed. And here the DBA team was working on it. So yeah.
Can your DBA team come and talk at a DevOps meetup about database automation?
The guy that was going to talk is he's a real downer on this. This whole thing turned him upside down. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
We should have that talk.
Yeah.
So again, right, like the internal collaboration and bringing teams together, I think is super important. And again, I probably sound like a broken record saying this, but bringing the external speakers in and networking with other different, whether it be other enterprise IT shops or just experts within the industry has been, it's huge. And I think that's a lot of what we've taken away as well as then the sharing of the between different organizations of what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you. Talk to us about your dojo and what is working there, and how do you do you actually do a mandate the DevOps? But sharing about how you actually do some of that across a large IT organization.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic, and I think we're gonna have to call it a wrap. But I want to give a big hand to our panel for sharing so much about their experience. And I know at least one of our panelists needs to head out pretty quickly, so if you have somebody you need to talk to, do the traditional, rush the front of the room. Other than that, rush the back of the room where the beers are. And be sure to take a look at the job board. An exciting thing going on this particular DevOps meetup that I haven't seen at one recently is there's actually 3 or 4 people who are looking, which, hold the phone. This is not something that happens all the time. So those of you who are trying to hire should definitely go take a picture of those email addresses with your phones and follow up. All right, thank you all so much for coming. And we have this space until 9, so feel free to stay, mingle, and drink beer. Thank you.